Welcome back. I bet you guys don't see Nike the same way before as you do now. I know I don't. For a variety of reasons, that documentary being one of the big ones, I don't actually purchase Nikes anymore. I do own some Nike products, but if I can help it, I don't actually physically buy them myself. So that is just one company, what they used to do. We don't really know if they do that anymore, but the cynic in me says they probably do. But there are a lot of publications out there that talk about companies that are socially responsible and follow some of the more acceptable rules around outsourcing and how they treat their labor force, even in international markets. So we're going to jump back into the slides. We are going to have another pause for another short documentary or news report, if you will, in another section of our lecture. But first, let's get back to some of the slides so we can continue talking about the international economy and the global markets. But this time, I'm going to remember to share my screen. That way, we don't have that huge dumb pause like we did in the beginning. Okay, so back to it. So, although foreign outsourcing, and let's be honest, Nike's not the only US company to use it. There is a long list of companies that have their products outsourced and produced somewhere else outside of this country. And the biggest advantage is that it is cheaper. So yeah, they pay the workers less than they would here. You know, unions have been vilified in recent years, but unions also protect their workers to make sure they get fair wages, fair compensation for the work they do. They get sick time, they get vacation time. You know, unions were responsible for the 5-day work week as opposed to a 7-day work week. So unions have done good for a lot of folks here in this country, but because of our federal minimum wage laws and because of unions and the fair treatment they demand for their members, US companies find a way to produce things cheaper and they outsource. So the biggest benefit to US companies for outsourcing is in fact cheap labor. It does reduce the overall cost. The risk involved can be high. Again, quality control is harder to do when your production facility is not in your backyard. It's not on the same property as your corporate headquarters, right? But let's move on. Let's talk about foreign direct investments. So when we talk about foreign direct, we're talking about firms that acquire foreign firms or develop new facilities from the ground up in foreign countries. Again, for the same reason, it's less costly to build, say, a facility, specifically a production facility, in Mexico than it is here, right? Joint ventures take place when 2 or more companies join forces to pursue specific opportunities. Forms of joint ventures. We have partnerships. Joint ventures involving 2 or more companies joining forces. They'll share the resources. They'll share risks and profits, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the companies are merging, okay? This specifically might be also referenced as a strategic alliance. Pardon me. It's a way to pursue a specific opportunity so that companies don't have to merge. Again, they share the risk, they share the costs, they also share in profits. Okay, so there are barriers to international trade. Most of the challenges that international trade faces can be divided into 3 categories: sociocultural differences, economic differences, and political and legal differences. These challenges vary from country to country. Countries with the most trade barriers usually have the least competition, which can be a real opportunity for the first international firm to actually break through. Tariffs, well, that is something we've probably heard quite a bit in the news lately, specifically in how we, the United States, are dealing with our essentially a trade war between us and China. Now, national governments are authorized to set up barriers that regulate international business. This is a form of protectionism or national protectionism. Okay, governments mostly use tariffs to shield fledgling industries that would shut down if they were not helped, or to support those industries that are important for the domestic economy. Again, right now, agriculture is the one right now trying to be protected by our current administration. Okay, quotas are limitations of the amounts of specific products that may be imported from certain countries. Again, this is readily apparent today in our economy and how we're relating to and how we're doing business with the country of China. Okay, voluntary export restraints, or VARs. The voluntary export restraint is imposed by an exporting country. This is usually done out of fear that the importing country would impose even more onerous restrictions. A country will levy an embargo to pressure the targeted country into changing its political policies or to protect national security. Some countries use non-tariff barriers because complaints about them could be too hard to prove, but also too easy to counter. Okay, now free trade. This idea of free trade is something that we're very familiar with. Again, if you follow the news, specifically in the first couple of years of our current administration, they had a specific move around free trade. We're going to get to it in a moment. Let's first learn some of the lingo about what's going on with free trade. Even though complete free trade is not a reality, the emergence of regional trading blocs, common markets, and international trade agreements has moved the world economy much closer to that goal. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT, was established in 1948 by 23 nations. The most significant changes stemmed from the 1986 to 1994 Uruguay round of negotiations. The World Trade Organization, the WTO, again, it's been in the news lately. This organization came into existence because of the Uruguay round of negotiations. Apart from the functions mentioned on the slide, the WTO also monitors the provisions of the GATT. The ministries of the WTO meet once every 2 years. The World Bank and the IMF. The World Bank was established after the Second World War. It provides technical and financial advice of developing countries. The member nation of the World Bank provides funds to the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. The IMF is best known for the help that it provides to the nations who are facing financial problems. One of those nations in recent years has been Greece, and so the IMF has been heavily involved in working with the Greek government. So, at the end of 2005, the IMF implemented a debt relief program for poor countries. Because of this program, the IMF has been able to forgive the loans taken by 35 different poor countries. All right, so the United States, Mexico, and Canada have joined to form the largest trading bloc. It's called NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. Except it's not called that anymore, because in the last 18 months or so, the United States, Canada, and Mexico have agreed to what's essentially was being called NAFTA 2.0. It was a way for them to renegotiate the current North American Free Trade Agreement and update it, catch it up to the times, specifically around technology. The first NAFTA agreement, the first North American Free Trade Agreement, was met with mixed results. we did lose a lot of jobs, particularly in the Rust Belt states. The manufacturing jobs that took place here in this country, they were shipped down to Mexico, right? Labor's cheaper there. Companies looking to increase profits ship those jobs down to Mexico because they don't have unions down there. They don't have the federal minimum wage down there. So a lot of jobs were lost here in this country due to the original North American Free Trade Agreement. In addition to that, what the agreement did, or in this case did not do, is that it did not foresee the leaps and bounds in technology that we would make. The North American Free Trade Agreement was originally negotiated during the Bill Clinton administration and not signed into law until the George Bush administration, George W. Bush, okay? So that's a while ago, right? We had 2 George Bush administrations, 2 Obama administrations, and now we're in the Donald Trump administration, right? So we're looking at 20 years since that was signed into law, okay? Technology 20 years ago was a lot different. For 20 years ago, we didn't have this, right? For 2, laptops, the Apple computer, no, they weren't near. Tablets didn't exist. And so all these technological advances, smartphones, smart homes, right? Smart TVs, all these advances took place, and the current agreement didn't take that into account. Specifically, it didn't take into account copyright and patent law, right? So specifically, the other 2 countries could take a look at what a US country is doing, take a look at their guidelines, and rip it off. And so it needed to be updated. And the current administration did just that. But what we also look at as another big trading bloc, one that's continuing to be in the news because it hasn't been resolved yet, is the EU, or the European Union. 28 European countries have come together to form the largest common market, the European Union. But at the same time as our current president was voted into office, England voted to exit the European Union. Great Britain wanted to exit the European Union, so they're calling it Brexit. Great Britain exit of the European Union, except it hasn't happened yet. They haven't found a way to decouple themselves from the European Union that would essentially stop the entire economy from collapsing altogether because they're so intertwined with all of the other countries in the Union. And so what we're going to do right now is pause again, because I want you to take a look at a somewhat comedic explanation of what Brexit could mean to Great Britain should they leave the European Union. What I want you to research this time around is, where is Great Britain in the process of leaving the EU? Just answer the simple question. Did they leave yet? If they haven't left, what's the timetable? Okay? So we're going to stop here. You're going to click on the YouTube video that I've attached and in this next announcement that this lecture was attached with. And you're going to take a look. A little salty language. I think you guys can handle it. I've shown it to other classes before. It's a John Oliver clip. So if you're familiar with John Oliver, you know, you're going to laugh too. At least I hope you will, because I do. So let's take a look.